It was extremely hot outside. The sun was scorching mercilessly, heating up the hot sand. There seemed to be nothing but drought and desert all around, where no living creature could survive under the scorching sun. Only the roofs of abandoned houses could be seen beneath the thick layer of sand. A gentle breeze pushed the sand in different directions, creating a cloud of dust that could obscure one's vision. A young man with blonde hair lay alone near a half-hidden concrete slab, barely opening his eyes. He immediately wondered where he was and what kind of place it was. Beads of sweat had already formed on his face, which was not surprising since he was dressed too warmly for the weather, wearing a shirt and pants. His wrists were chained with a special iron bracelet that had numbers on it, and his hands were tightly clenched, causing them to bleed. It was extremely uncomfortable to move. Suddenly, a female voice from outside advised the young man not to move, as she warned him about the 60-degree heat. She even made an inappropriate joke, as if someone nearby was frying meat. But in reality, it was the young man himself who was almost being cooked in such heat, and with spices, he would be even tastier. The blonde man tried to sit up somehow, and there was a crust-like appearance on his back due to the wound. His shirt was torn and stained with blood, and in some places it was stuck and seemed to have fused with his skin, causing an unpleasant pulling sensation. Looking around, the guy heard a question and asked where he was. The voice told him not to think about everything at once because there was too much data to analyze. It seemed like a robot was talking to him, but there was no one around, which was very annoying. The young man had his own guess about how the time travel had happened, but this time, a robotic voice asked why his guardian hadn't saved money to buy him a new processor and a new card. The young man glanced at the half-buried, destroyed buildings in the sand, and before he could ask his question, the voice answered that they were over 700-year-old public toilets. It was rare to find a place with a 3.5-star danger rating, even though the toilets were no longer functional. But the average-grade mutant creatures were still welcome. An average-grade mutant was something between a snake and a frog that had evolved hundreds of years later on Earth. The young man processed all this information in his head, reviewing the facts, and then looked at the deserted road that led between the houses. The voice enthusiastically announced that it liked this road a lot because there was not a single source of water for hundreds of kilometers, and the young man was already halfway there and could soon collapse from dehydration. An updated version of the infamous trisomy didn't give him the right to refuse. The voice added that there was a jackpot on that side, with 2 corpses hiding just 16 meters away. Therefore, the young man could try to use the legendary tag here, and they would be very happy with a dinner. Suddenly, as the voice continued to make nonchalant jokes and talk about everything, the young man noticed that he was receiving information about everything he wasn't looking at. It was like a blessing for time travelers, and since the 3 other directions were too dangerous, there was only one option left: to follow the road, even between the houses, because there was water there. As they say, if there's only one short answer among the 3, then you must choose the young man. Press on his chained hands. He barely stood up on his wobbly legs while the voice asked to be careful with him. The situation is as follows. 5 girls are injured and can no longer use traditional skills. The blonde man drew attention to his chains and thought, has he really become a criminal in this life? But this thing seems very strange at first sight. They are chains, but in fact, people have long ceased to believe in them because the aristocrats on the 4th floor turned the chains into a means of spying on slaves. But it is better not to try to remove them in any case. Now we must try to find shelter, otherwise the scorching sun will just burn him. It seems that he has entered a very strange world. There is also an emergency situation. A person can withstand 1 hour at a temperature of 71 degrees and 49 minutes at 82 degrees. And the guy doesn't have much time, so we can only hope that there is at least a water source on this road. It's just surveillance. The Gan directs its bright pink eyes to the sky and thinks deeply about it. At that time, wealthy men watched the game from a large plasma screen, unaware that it was an illusion. Why is the guy still alive? He lasted more than 10 minutes. A girl with strange white glasses asked if it was true that the guy entered through the blue door. Aren't the blue areas the hottest? Why does this boy look so cheerful? Everyone wants to see how the dead will eat the guys. So where are all the monsters? Surely he couldn't have smuggled a gifted man pretending to be a slave. This guy seems completely calm. At that moment, on the other side of the screen, the guy counted not on the asphalt, which already counted 29.96. She says sex. It turned out that people live in the tower, and outside it is very dangerous, almost impossible to survive. You have to think, no one has lived in this place for 700 years. The air temperature is 60 degrees. There is a surveillance device. The average degree of mutation and decline is falling. The living conditions for people in the towers are unfavorable. The tower has a clear hierarchy, and the higher the floor, the higher the status. The chains keep track of how people survive outside the tower, and that means all of this is a gamble for survival. All these thoughts were spinning in the blonde man's head as he continued to move forward. It was not difficult for him to combine all the facts and understand the overall picture. 300 seconds, 50 seconds. It seems that the air temperature is reaching 70 degrees. It is urgent to find shade in 15 minutes, otherwise his efficiency will decrease significantly. The voice suddenly said that half of the honors for finding water should be awarded to the voiceover. What would he have done without these instructions? The rules for survival outside the tower are simply outrageous. At this temperature, one could earn more points with water. The young man finally reached the red tap with water and was glad that it worked. He washed his dirty and injured hands there, and noticed that in such heat, the water was unrealistically cold, and that meant that the groundwater had not had time to warm up yet. In that case, the guy could descend into a sewer because the temperature there should obviously be lower. And since there is a water supply in this city, then water must be somewhere nearby. When the guy finally found the well, the voiceover congratulated him on finding a refuge for mice and rats. Now he won't fry under the scorching sun anymore. The guy still considered it only as a temporary measure, regardless of his luck, as he still wouldn't be able to endure for too long in such terrible conditions. He noticed that the guy was fully aware of his situation. The only way out of the game is to find a way back to the tower. Since people in Paris are onto it, the system didn't mention if the handcuffs could transmit sound. Besides, he doesn't know what language is being spoken here. He must be a good boy in the new world, so he wants to show that he won't play by their rules. That's why the blonde man raises his hands, showing them to the major surveillance, while foolishly smiling. He lets the onlookers seethe in the background. The system's voice fades with indignation, and the viewers watching the show are shocked by the arrogance of this slave. Is he really not talented? Someone from the audience is convinced that the young man is a fake actor and that everything is fake. The man wants the gamer to die quickly. Where is the carefree attitude? They want to tear the guy to shreds. He thought it was all just for fun. I didn't think his gamble could work, but this kid has lived long enough. A girl dressed in a pink dress with a turquoise mask on her face listens while she's told on the phone that the guy's death is guaranteed. The product definitely comes from the beggars on the shelf. He certainly has no talent. The girl responds on the phone, hoping she won't have to explain what to do at this time. In a large multi-layered brick house with red roofs in the suburbs, an old man in a tailcoat and white gloves wipes the sweat off his forehead after talking to a lady and says that the target is in the blue zone. Despite the protests, he tells him to pretend to fall and get rid of the merchandise. When the man says he understands, the old man asks what his talent level is. The man in iron armor replies that he has a level 755, made free 5, the accompanying strength, and the 4th stage of the 2nd level. The mustached man shakes his finger and says that's very good. But the fallen in the blue song are very strong, so it's better for a man to control all his emotions. If those monsters sense emotions, they'll attack immediately. The old man orders the knight to go to the passage point and gives him a piece of paper with the number of the zone where the target is located. He reminds him that even if he dies, the guy must be taken to his grave. The knight turns on his heels and walks away to carry out the order. In a previous life, it was sunset outside, and in the orange sunlight, a gang of Gains stood over a guy who held a bridle in his hands and didn't understand why the trash can't feel pain. He didn't even blink. Do they really not feel pain? He's just a demon, one of the least sensitive. For some reason, this guy is different from others. The kid stood in front of a photo of his deceased father, while others whispered behind his back. He wondered who that guy could be. Could they be the son of that fallen old man? He didn't even shed a single tear. Is he even human? There were inscriptions on the stand around the photo of the deceased, saying that the greatness of the spirit never dies, that the soul is reborn. The brunette looks at the photo with a stone-faced expression. The whisperers realize that the dog has more feelings than he does. All of this happened in the administrative department of the Special Police Force when the young man arrived. Passing by the police station, one could hear them discussing a serial murder case that had remained unsolved for 10 years. Surprisingly, It was resolved within just 1 week, thanks to an exceptionally talented individual who has a knack for catching criminals. Of course, only a monster can understand another monster. Suddenly, a wicked laugh echoed through the air. The next memory that came to mind was an older evening when 4 policemen surrounded an armed bandit, pointing their guns at him, urging him to drop his weapon and surrender to the authorities. However, the bandit defied them, shouting for them to get out, and fired a shot. It struck him in the heart, and the young man fell into a puddle of water. Eventually, they managed to apprehend the bandit, but it was too late. Let's return to the present. The blonde man gazes at his reflection in the water, reminiscing about his past life, where he was ruthlessly killed. But his thoughts are interrupted by the sinister laughter of the system's voice. The voice claims that the face on the first floor of the tower scores 9 out of 10. It all seems incredibly unfair. The voice proposes a duel with a guy, to which he wearily declines, expressing his lack of interest. Since the voice organizes the game, it should control everything, right? In response, he is offered to surrender in order to save his life and avoid dishonor. Suddenly, the guy stands up and realizes that an expected guest is approaching, someone who should be properly received. The mandate's voice cautions against treading on a razor's edge again. It's time to search for clues and find a new home. The blonde man poses a question. If you pretend to be scared, does it compel anything? The response he receives is that the voice merely cares a little about him. So why does it try to put him in embarrassing and difficult situations? The young man realizes that the guest has already arrived, a knight in armor turning the corner of the street. The voice recognizes that he possesses level 755 talent and 4th stage 2nd level accompanying power. This guy's strength is incredibly high. He might even be from an elite with abilities comparable to General Penfend. Clearly, he could easily overpower the blonde man, but the young man doesn't think so. Judging by the sound, the guest is 10 meters away, but he is sly and elusive, making it challenging to approach him. Killing him will be very difficult. The voice states that it doesn't matter since he would probably die anyway. Moreover, this knight is highly suspicious of Coco's old customs. The young man's friend Samuel wonders if he truly possesses the speed of a 2nd-level person and the talent of a steel general. Does he really use their style? The soldier appears surprised, and the young man asks if he's curious how he knows so much about him. He doesn't seriously believe that a low-level slave could survive for so long in this place. Does the soldier really think it's a routine murder mission? The young man is simply innocent. Apparently, this behavior irritates the soldier, but the young man asks him to wait, as it's going to be very amusing now. Many people want to catch him, so the boss sent a soldier to take care of him. But can we be sure this isn't part of their plan? An insignificant, worthless slave who should have died outside the tower. But it's not just that. He is not a lackey, so he has also mocked everyone. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? Meanwhile, the boss sent a poor soldier to kill him, the white-haired one. Everyone is eagerly anticipating tearing the boy into pieces, but in a real scenario, he won't break it, and he will stay in this place forever. The good will walk over his corpse and continue mocking his aristocrats. At that moment, the croupier will start a new game. The players will become even crazier. Thus, the soldier is ready to accept the final gift. Throughout this time, while the guy was delivering such a long monologue that drove the opponent away, the young man knew that there was that creature above their heads, the one that had fallen, and at the end of his long speech, he seemed to incite to attack the knight with his finger. A huge worm with a red mouth and many sharp teeth rushed towards the guests and swallowed them completely. The knight tried to scream, but in the end, the predator dragged him into the water. The voice congratulated the wonderful boy for such an act. It's a pity that the water was clean. The voice advised Gain not to thank the green one personally, as it could end badly. From that distance, he attracted this fallen one, showing just a drop of negative emotion. Besides, he wanted to kill the guy lying in the water. The blonde asked to forget the voice because he is a good boy and cannot provoke negative emotions. That's why he entered the water. The enemy's body hadn't cooled yet, so one could immediately feel it, and positive emotions would immediately appear. The guy pulled out something very similar to an iron eye. It's a black and golden legend. It was the return device he wanted so much. To activate it, you need time, and it arrives immediately where he wants. The area was explored 4.5%. There are still 35 dead bodies. The fragments of the apocalyptic puzzle have not been received yet, and the evaluation of the path worked carelessly. but a beginner can only survive if he passes the level. Therefore, you must forget the rest for now and get out of the sewers, but quickly." The guy looked at the return device in his hands and really hoped that it would be much more interesting. In the tower, there were 3 people from the Foreign Intelligence Corps at Headquarters 7. A spacious office where one stood and talked to the other 2 about his Bai Wu, who was about 19 years old, a man who was also at a large table, wiping his sword. He asked the speaker if that was all the information. The man in the armchair turned out to be Captain Guckin, nicknamed Wood Joe, of the 7th Division. The captain of Unit 13, Vumu, was the one sitting on the couch. He burst out laughing at the level of interrogation of this team, which fell heavily. Was it because Woodju spent too much time outside the tower, and his team took advantage of his absence? The man at the table asked for an explanation from the speaker and told the captain that it was useless to intimidate or entice him with something. He could calmly point out the flaws in their interrogation method. Therefore, the members of his team became the ones who were interrogated. "Who the hell did they catch?" the captain asked. Gain asked what he would get in return. It was very strange that the boy asked how many floors there were in the tower and how the dead appeared. He asked questions about the strength and talents he possessed, as well as what even a 3-year-old child knows. Therefore, it is impossible to understand if he's pretending or just stupid. He also asked to see the talent table. Liu inserted his comment about this interesting boy. "There aren't enough people in the 13th Division, so why wouldn't God give him to us?" Loomis asked. He really wanted to recruit him for himself. Then he definitively shoots the Sparrows with a cannon. News has reported that the captain seemed to like this guy. Then the captain said that their team had received a message 5 months ago about the disappearance of a man who owed him money. Later, when the captain took over the case, he discovered that the number of missing people was much larger. Yumu asked if the previous cases were not the concern of the police, and why the captain got involved in this whole story. The captain wondered why these noble soldiers cared about the fate of lower-class people. He considered it only a concern of those on the 3rd floor and above, and the owners. Then the captain followed the clues and found a gambling house. It seemed that the nobles were very bored and had decided to organize the Hunger Games. The dealer of this gambling house, along with people from the 4th floor, decided to put people in the blue zone. I was shocked by what was happening in the blue zone, wondering if they were crazy. All because the white zone no longer excited them. The extreme temperature and high level of danger in the blue zone gave them great pleasure, but their calculations were disrupted by a surviving man. He survived for nearly 2 hours without being hit by a single attack. An assassin was sent after him to take care of him, but in the end, the assassin was killed himself. Then the captain received an anonymous call from a woman. Judging by her voice, she sounded quite young. Yumu didn't understand why the core of the straitjacket wasn't responding, as it was an adventure of the nobles. The 4th floor had never shown affection for their core intelligence, and I couldn't understand it either. His main goal was to bypass the dealer and save Bai Wu. It turned out that the survivor was Bai Wu, which was quite interesting. Ujus asked the man if he was skilled in interrogation, so why wouldn't Captain of Unit 13 personally participate? Musset said he thought so too, and we need to see what kind of deadly game it is. The captain said he was a formidable weapon, so he needed to be dealt with properly. 700 years ago, the end of the world arrived, and the world changed, becoming too harsh for human survival. Monsters called Folon began to appear continuously. At that time, humanity faced a threat to its existence. Another tower appeared before the eyes of humanity. Nobody knows how it appeared or why it was built, but it was only inside that tower that people could live and hope for some future. At some point, some people discovered a power within themselves that could resist the fallen, a force known as concomitant power. At that moment, in the interrogation room, a young girl stood by the blackboard and spoke about this same force that greatly enhances a person's physical abilities, speed, and other basic capacities. If someone wants to increase their level of concomitant power, they don't need to train hard. They just need to leave the tower. The longer a person stays outside, the higher their level of concomitant power becomes. In short, outside the tower, people can become much stronger. However, not only people, but objects can also undergo changes in this way. Over time, they become what they call Gillen. Another man also stood by the blackboard and added that, in addition to all this, If the power is accompanied by basic combat abilities such as strength, speed, and agility, it becomes a powerful superpower. According to current statistics, there are a total of 10.24 talents, and the higher the talent, the more powerful the abilities are. It is rare, and the stronger it is. Unfortunately, most people have it around 1700. As a result, many individuals with talents exceeding 500 are attracted to the military. These people become the main asset of each unit, and their most important achievement is to survive alone for 24 days in the blue zone outside the tower. Even the members of the tower's measurement unit, who previously turned their noses up at it, urged him to join them. By the way, the tower's straitjacket and the Foreign Intelligence Unit are structures approved by the ruling class of the 5th floor. The straitjacket unit consists of aristocrats' children who still despise civilians because it is much more dangerous outside the tower. People often refer to the Foreign Intelligence Unit as the refugee unit. Meanwhile, 2 people stood in the interrogation room for some reason, all for Bai Wu, the blonde who recently entered the blue zone. He realized that this world encourages people to leave the tower. The man didn't understand what the guy was saying. The survival rate outside the tower is so low that most people would rather stay inside the tower all the time. The force, Gilling's talent, and everything else can only be obtained by leaving the tower. The longer a person stays outside the tower, the stronger their power and talent become. The effectiveness of items in this case also increases significantly. If Woodju survived continuously for 24 days, his power reached a terrifying level 8. As soon as he encounters someone who has fallen, he instantly and mercilessly destroys them. The captain of the 13th unit suddenly burst into the interrogation room. None of the people present could understand what he had forgotten there. The captain told the guy to leave and have a drink because he wanted to have a separate conversation with this kid. Bai Wu was sitting and drinking something from a glass. Meanwhile, Humus sat in front of the gain and said they would start working right away. The man had just started saying something when the guy immediately blurted out that he was ready to join his unit. The man was very surprised and wondered how the guy could give him the impression that he wanted to offer himself. He immediately warned that he didn't want to join his team. He wants to stay here. After all, he already knows 2 people from this team quite well. Lin was still surprised. Bai Wu said that the interrogation means they know nothing about him. They didn't get rid of him, which means the man who threw him out of the tower is not among them. If he is not the enemy, then after the interrogation and all this fooling around, the Foreign Intelligence Unit will want to recruit him. But judging by Young Shui's reaction, she was very surprised by his announcement. It means his arrival in this office is normal, and apparently, he is not the captain of their unit. Moreover, if the gain is not mistaken, then his shield is broken. The Jilly boat might be damaged. It seems that the dead ones Humus fights are stronger than the ones the gain himself encountered. Omu asked him how he knew the man was using a shield. Then he was told that he had a scar on his arm, 3 centimeters below the wrist. Since he is the captain of a central unit of the Foreign Intelligence, the accompanying force level cannot be low. The recovery capabilities will be the same. It will be difficult for people to leave such a scar on their hands inside the tower, and there is nothing for that. Normal people have raised handles, but those from Humus are pushed, the point of application of force for using the shield and the wrist joint. Consequently, people who have been using shields for a long time are familiar with this arm deformation, and there were also scratches on the shield indicating damage. Breaking 1,000,000 is not something ordinary fallen individuals can do. While the gain was saying all this, he had already forgotten why he came to the interrogation room. He was just discouraged that the guy easily discovered all this. He talks and talks so much, and the blonde continued, saying that when he raised his hand to protect his face, he was struck with claws 3 centimeters below the wrist. He realized that the guy sitting right in front of him was a real talent. "We need to find a way to recruit him into our unit," Bai Wu said. He said he needed a complete table because the talent chart he was given only had those below 700. And if someone helps him obtain it, then maybe he can. The guy didn't have time to finish because the man flew out of the office like a bullet, apparently to fetch the complete table. Captain Humus rushed down the hallway at full speed, looking for that same table, panting. Lumu placed on the table that the gain had requested. He doesn't seem to know much about the tower. The guy replied that he had lost his memory. Loomis realized that judging by what Bai Wu had said earlier, that couldn't be true. But the guy could certainly come up with a more appropriate reason. The gain, A blonde said it's better that he believes it to avoid dire consequences. He's a kidnapper. We can use him. What does that mean? Forcibly erasing the guy's memory? The man said that of the lower 3 levels, Winju has the greatest talent, 156 Ultimate Shadow. For a long time, there haven't been any with higher level talents, 66 Absolute Dissolution. It is said that over 20 years ago, the miner awakened his talent, Ethan. It's like winning the lottery. They literally soar immediately into the sky. Well, it's time to think that it must have been very difficult for someone like him to understand everything. But this poor man simply disappeared. It is assumed that the organization took him from the upper levels. It might have been the 5th floor where the government is located, or the 6th floor. However, this case was not further investigated. Instead, they simply tried to erase information about the person. The sign says that Talent 24 is the Eye of Nearness. With a focused gaze, a person can obtain information about the corresponding hidden side of their personality. The Eye of Prey is great news. It must have something to do with important information. The guy who just arrived in this world doesn't know much yet, but what about the hidden side of his personality? Is it really that cheap? That's why his body has such high abilities. If he had stayed outside the tower for a long time, it's just that his accompanying strength is weak, which means his body was still on the streets. For the first time, it seems that his body holds many secrets. Bai Wu asked the man if someone could force him to measure talent. That's why I have a negative talent. The fact that all talents are individual, like in the intelligence core, many people's talents are hidden and never manifest, was very good news. Another point is that you can only awaken one talent, but on the 6th floor, they say you can obtain additional talents by killing powerful foes. But even if they fall, it's better not to encounter them. The predatory eye is not suited for combat, although it's possible to discover talents that may not be suitable for fighting. Therefore, the blonde must find a way to leave the tower and find another talent. The man tried to interrupt the guy's thoughts. He said he had obtained the table for himself, as he had requested. So, what about the matter? Well, he took the sheets in his hands and placed them on the captain's chest. He apologized and said that he was a very good person, but he still chose the 7th Division. During the last 3 hours of interrogation, the guy discovered that the 7th unit, out of the 24, was the one that most frequently left the tower. I don't understand why they don't join the highest division. Furthermore, if a Gap wants to leave the tower, they can take it to the vanguard of the 13th Division. And if they don't want to leave the tower, then they can join the interrogation team. They just need to ask. Bai Wu asked if the man was married by any chance. You must choose someone who loves you from the start, no need to waste time. He lost because he was late. The first impression of the guy was made by the 7th Division. They are closer to him, and also the number 13 is unlucky. The young man left, and Lulu stayed in the interrogation room, monitoring everything that had just happened. A little later, the blonde entered a modern elevator that went 900 meters down to the bottom. Volio and Byoga discovered from the fingerprint that the guy had no ID card before, but since he joined their unit, he has become at least a citizen of the lower state. Moreover, they found a place for the guy in the southwest part of the shelf. Of course, the guy will have to pay the rent himself, 400 hours per month. Suddenly, the voice said that the guy understood everything perfectly during the game. People often encounter a strong NPC right from the beginning, but pretending to be such a character while wearing a cap doesn't seem right. The man turned to the blonde and said he had forgotten to introduce himself tonight. He said his name was Bucking, and he was certainly hiding something that even interests people on the 6th floor. The man said that the Gap could simply call him Captain, but the guy called him by his nickname, which surprised everyone in the elevator. The blonde also had a request. The captain told her that if she didn't want to leave the tower, she should join the interrogation group, as there had been many cases recently. The guy interrupted and said he wanted to leave the tower on his own terms, which surprised everyone. The captain said they had tested his strength when he was in the blue zone. It took him less than 2 hours to go from level 1 to level 3. But at this level, even if he encounters the weakest fallen, Barreau told the captain that if he wanted to remind the guy how dangerous it was there and that he couldn't leave, then it wasn't necessary. Just let the Gap leave accompanied by experienced partners. He won't be a burden to them in any way. He's not seeking death. And to be honest, Bihu thinks that the captain doesn't want the guy to stay in the tower either. The captain gave up and said the guy could leave tomorrow at 10 o'clock. He led a group of 4 people, plus the guy himself. It turns out to be a team of 6 people. They will go to the White Zone. The blonde also asked what was in the White Zone, and everyone in the elevator nervously thought that the guy really didn't know anything about this world. The elevator finally landed in the right place. The captain said they were there. That's where the guy will live. He will go down to a lower floor that still looked high everywhere. The vibrant nighttime city was visible, shining with bright colors. There were bright signs and banners everywhere. They descended into the area located below the first floor of Jianlu's port tower, the man who was with him during the interrogation, before the Humu came out and apologized for making him wait so long. He was delayed because Captain Rudio had to eat to handle some formalities first. They will take Gala to where they currently live, and at the same time they can walk around. Their belongings have already been taken to his apartment, but they still brought their clothes with them in case he suddenly likes something on the way. But they can buy it from the guy because Captain Gout allocated money for him in the bag. The street in front of you is called Diane Luber, and you can buy everything your heart desires there. The blonde man from the other side warned the guy not to believe the merchants who try to sell him Gillens. Everywhere, the calls from traders and advertisements on screens announcing something started to be heard. For example, you can buy a shovel with divine power. How much did it cost to broadcast such an advertisement? The man who announced said, "What punishment would happen if a person just started digging with that same shovel? But they've already dug so much that others can't do it in a month and a half." So he would certainly keep that shovel for himself. Now he can only throw it away or sell it to a lucky person. The voice in my head didn't deign to such a speech. What kind of intelligence core replaces goods? It would be better to put the girl in the advertisement. The ad kept saying that there were only 998 tasks, and the euro, and he would not regret buying his shovels. And if he buys now, he will also get a huge discount. The girl with glasses didn't understand at all what was going on. After all, there is no such person in their team. Why are there still people pretending to be them? They should not be allowed to tarnish the name of their corps. We must report it urgently to Captain Yu, and he will definitely take care of this guy. The man standing next to Bai Wu asked young Shui to calm down because they still had a lot to do. But then the blonde interrupted and told him to go with the girl because she shouldn't be allowed to do what. As a result, the man followed the girl and told the guy to go alone to his home, and he has money in his bag. Bai Wu had a headache, and a voice asked him if the guy found anything interesting there. Half an hour later, the blonde man opened the door to his apartment. There was a note on the suitcase saying that the basic equipment for Intelligence Corps members was inside. The note was from Captain View, who asked to carefully examine all the contents of the suitcase. Having noticed that the captain was very attentive to work, he found out that beginners receive a watch to detect negative emotions when they leave the tower. When negative emotions reach the threshold of 75, an alarm immediately goes off. All Corps members must follow the rules when the alarm is triggered, so you must immediately use the teleportation disc. It's a very good survival mechanism outside the tower, after all. Sometimes people don't know in what emotional state they are, and this mechanism will reduce the risks, the number of problems. But for a blonde, this thing is completely useless. But the guy should not be upset about it, because there is still one thing in the box that will certainly interest him. It's a tranquilizer that suppresses emotions. He can take it when he is very close to falling and about to enter the danger zone. His muscles relax, and he enters a state of calm for 5 short minutes. Of course, after those 5 minutes, his state of calm transforms into a state of hyperactivity, and his negative emotions intensify. Therefore, it is better not to use it unless absolutely necessary. Bayo asked if it works as an emotional source. Initially, he is rushed, and after 100 minutes he is released, and an emotional explosion occurs. The voice confirmed that everything was correct. Then the blonde injected himself with that serum. Can he really feel so many negative emotions? The voice can only wish him good luck. 100 minutes later, a voice asked if the guy felt anything, or if he was just going to sleep. The blonde man replied that he felt nothing, as expected. The next day the guy was taken to a place where he exits the tower. They have the ability to travel through space. In fact, they are used to block those guys at the top of the tower. It is better not to get involved in all of this for the common good, because it is just better for the guy to pretend not to know anything. A whole crowd of people suddenly came to fetch the guy. It was Captain Gout and other people, apparently new recruits joining them today for the reconnaissance outside the tower. The first one to introduce himself was a tall guy with a long tail. His name was Wanksy, and for some reason, he asked if Jilly was accidentally hidden in the back of the blonde man. The voice noted that this guy was really interesting. As they say, if you're in sports, you have head problems. This Wanksy is the son of a wealthy family, born on the 3rd floor of the tower. He was always looking for freshness and danger, so he declined the Tower Core measure and joined the Intelligence Corps. And as a macho, he naturally likes Barbie dolls. When Work 6 leaned towards Bai Wu, he replied that he planned to leave the tower and try his luck somewhere on the side. A guy with purple hair asked the recruit not to bother, hoping that the blonde would not meet a painful death today. This Monday always says that, so you just have to get used to it. The man with long hair said that he didn't know himself well, which is why he wouldn't save the gain in case of something, and he wouldn't cry if the game or the voice discovered that this guy from the 2nd floor is more beautiful than the girls, toxic, and enjoys dismemberment. How about trying to control him? Bai Wu can only cling to influential people and not bother, and the scene with long hair looks very good, and she called him Ginsor. The guy didn't like this treatment, and he already felt like rushing towards the blonde, but the athlete stopped him. Suddenly, someone tugged on his pants, and it turned out to be a little guy. He started introducing himself as Shantae TSE and stuttered a lot. At first glance, this child looks like a puppy, but in battle, he is the craziest of them all. Often, the first impression is deceiving, but that won't make everyone yield to him. Therefore, the blonde must be very careful with him. Bai Wu extended her hand, but the boy was pushed into a bee, and a girl with white hair shook his hand. It was Ginseng. The voice was very pleased with such beauty. She's like an Avenger, just like in Shorty. There are secrets, hidden things that interest the 6th floor. She is from the 2nd floor and seems to be the most normal one in this group. The guy wondered if she had a rare talent. Speaking of the group, shouldn't there be 6 people? Maybe they forgot someone. Suddenly, the captain approached the guy, put his hand on his shoulder, and said that the 6th participant was already dead. Therefore, it's better for him to think about himself. B concluded that there are only villains in this group. The captain told everyone that it was time for the advanced team to return, and that it was now time for them to prepare because they would be leaving the tower immediately. The team returned, and the columns caught fire. Everyone must be very careful. Soldiers appeared from the portal, confirming the safe return of the preliminary reconnaissance group, 103,788. The exploration has been conducted. There are sufficient energy resources, and none of the fallen ones were found. Bai Wu watched all this. He realized that the world outside the tower is random. Therefore, someone from the Intelligence Corps should be responsible for the preliminary study of the area, ensuring that there is no energy mine in the area and only a few monsters. Only then is this area sent to a low-task team for the work. The person who took the report from the newcomer announced that it was time to move the next group, but when he saw the naked captain, he immediately wished him good luck. The captain touched the portal and ordered the crew to follow him. The girl asked to check the watch and tranquilizers again, and she began to explain to the newcomers that as soon as they crossed the portal, a number would be generated. The number entered the Jogan grid on the side of the portal, and the number increased horizontally. The guy had to pass by. It turned out that the number is a 7-digit number. In other words, during the 700 years of the Tower era, people have already explored millions of areas. The blonde was delighted with this journey beyond the tower. When the team emerged from the portal, there was a bright flash that made their eyes squint. In front of them stood a wire fence, behind which stood old abandoned skyscrapers. The guy with violet hair asked if it was a psychiatric hospital by any chance. A voice in Bai Wu's head said that if they didn't enter this 9th psychiatric hospital, it would be very difficult for them to conduct research. But who knows what awaits them there? How many negative emotions can mentally ill people have? It's a terrible labyrinth of evil, so the voice doesn't want Blondie to go, but inside, there are certainly many secrets that only Bai Wu can solve. The guy starts digesting the words they were told. Only he can solve it. Does this have something to do with the pieces of the puzzle of the bad day? Then the athlete spoke up. He noticed that this crazy hospital has a very strange name. You have to go there and see what else is inside. The kid who understood the least, that there are too many dangers inside and is decidedly very scared because of that. The voice noticed that this little one is always the king of drama. Obviously, he is calm as an actor. The captain began checking the indicators. The temperature was completely normal, around 46 degrees. However, the possibility of rapid change cannot be ruled out. The voice was outraged that 46 degrees are completely normal for a captain. Have they all gone mad? The blonde girl turned around and said that there is no grass or minerals around. They must be very close to the city. Only trees and the road behind them. The joke hit hand in hand. She said that she would have been better off going inside and seeing what was down there. They simply didn't have any other choice. Scenes like this usually only happen in the blue zone, so she asked everyone to be extremely cautious and not to rush. Lenzo asked, "Is he really that shy? Then why did you come out of the tower with them? If he's so scared, he can just go back." He just keeps dragging them down with him while also attracting all the dead, ignoring all the quarrels. Captain Bus and Mansa said he would go first. He headed towards the gate and pushed the door. When they entered, they realized there were 4 medical buildings, each with 19 floors, and it didn't look like an ordinary hospital at all. So, there are 4 buildings in front of them. So how do you investigate the first one? The blonde decided to express her hypothesis. She thinks they can only go to one, except for building 1. The lower floors of the remaining buildings have no entrance at all. Everything is completely blocked. If they suddenly want to enter the second building, they first have to go to the 19th floor and cross the aerial corridor. Wangxi and Anju suddenly admitted that the guy was very helpful. And why is it so inconvenient to make an entrance? It's a hospital. Bai Wu agreed that all of this was very inconvenient. But if something goes against common sense, there must be a good reason for it. It's possible that the owner doesn't want anyone to enter the second building. The boy standing next to Ilma was nervous and suddenly called the captain. He realized that there were 17 evil spirits in that building, and he was very scared. The voice didn't want to believe in the boy's fantastic play. He's playing his role perfectly and doing his best to suppress his excitement. How interesting all of this is. Captain Gru ordered everyone to be alert and attentive. They entered the first building. The guys entered the first building where everything was dirty and damp. There were old papers and garbage on the floor. It was obvious that this hospital had been abandoned for a long time. Everywhere was complete chaos. Bai Wu suddenly traced a red mark on the wall with his finger and realized it was blood. But where did it come from? The bloodstains were dark red. It seemed they had been left quite recently. Bihu went to the wall and stood near the wall with a strange symbol, then asked the voice if he had seen something. The voice replied that he wasn't mentally ill, so how could he know the symbols written on the wall? It's a psychiatric hospital, and he is sane and sensible. However, the only thing the voice can say is that these bloodstains were left here 2 days ago. He asked if someone intentionally left them, or if they were trying to hide something here. "My daughter, can you show us the way?" However, the voice can't help the guy in any way because he has to think everything through with his own mind. One psychologist told the captain that there are many rooms in this hospital. Does that mean they have to explore each one of them? Captain Guy ignored the athlete's question and asked for Bai Wu's opinion. The blonde replied that there were too many rooms, and by exploring them one by one, it might be possible to get the necessary information. But the most intimate secret is still in the 4th building. Lan Shu was discouraged. What other hidden secret does this new guy have? It seems that he's touched the tender feelings of the long-haired one. Apparently, he doesn't like his hand on his forehead. The guy said that it explained everything only once, and the next time you have to believe it immediately. The captain looked like a newcomer who had earned the respect of the crew. It seemed like the guy was taking all the power into his hands, as he had said at the beginning of the 4 buildings. Ring the first at an entrance, so if you need help while passing from the 4th building, you must go from the ground floor to the 19th, cross the 3rd and 2nd buildings, and come to the 1st. Finally, from the 19th floor, he will go to the desired floor in the 1st building. Meanwhile, a patient is waiting regardless of the illness. He can already choose his next body for reincarnation. Captain Guy noticed that the layout of this hospital was really unusual, but the blonde interrupted and said that if you think logically, it resembles more of a prison than a hospital. That's because there is only one entrance, so the prisoner has only one way to escape. This way, the prisoners can be easily controlled since it's a prison. The 4th building is the farthest and the most secret place in the entire hospital. The arguments were interrupted by the boy, who once again pointed to the side of a trembling lane and said that the elevator went there by itself. Then Captain Guy ordered everyone to be on alert and prepare for battle. During all this time, the guy was interested in one question. No one had experienced it outside the tower for 700 years. These cities and hospitals should have been destroyed long ago, so why do some objects still exist, and furthermore in working condition? Captain View replied that he wasn't quite sure, but in some places they had already been to, objects were activated from time to time. For example, in an amusement park, a Ferris wheel can turn on its own. The rules outside the tower are very strange. It's not just space that changes. B or S realized that it seemed the unsolved mysteries were still as bad. It seems that the unexplainable phenomenon is considered the norm in this place. Meanwhile, the elevator arrived at the first floor, and everyone leaned forward to see who was there. When the doors opened, a huge, one-eyed monster appeared from inside. It's impossible to describe what Neg had instead of a face. As soon as the monster rushed towards them, the captain ordered everyone to step back. He drew his sword and cut off the man's head in one blow. The voice noted that Gillen's level at the moment of impact was 190. When touching the fallen, it reduces their defense and increases the chances of hitting their weak point. Of course, its effectiveness also depends on the owner. In a battle with the fallen of average mutation level, everything depends on the skill of the fighters. Captain Yu declared that there was no reason to fear the fallen of the second mutation level, and it was now time for them to go up to the 19th floor. Bai Wu noticed that the captain's army had been outside the tower for 19 days, and the captain's record of being outside the tower was 24 days. That means his weapon became 1,000,000 in 5 days. The guys headed towards the elevator, and they had a somewhat uneasy feeling. They began to press the blonde as they had already entered the elevator and saw how the gas crouched next to the fallen corpses. He examined the place where the head had been severed and began his analysis. The impact around the wound was quite dry and cracked. As soon as the monster's mouth changed and became like that of a mosquito, the limbs remained intact, although they changed shape. They became like claws. The concept of the fallen ones from the second level of mutation is roughly that they are somewhat like a person. When B suddenly decided to undress the monster, a voice asked him why he was doing it. The Fallen certainly have no rights as a person, but it's still not very good. It seems that some unnecessary things were also recorded a few seconds later. The guy found a good thing, a torn sheet from the newspaper. It was written on it that the person who wrote all this didn't have depression. They just owed a lot of money. If they come here, they will never be able to find it here. But they were mistaken. Every day someone tries to find a way down. The girl from the 11th floor is very poor. Will she really become the same? Should I transfer her to the second building? She just wants to get out of here, that's all. There are tears and footprints in the corners of the sheet, most likely left by the patient. Let's hastily try to hide this page when his journal was taken away from him and the recording was made by selling 26 secs. It's now the year 704 of the Tower era. How much time has passed? Many objects in this world, like a piece of paper, haven't been destroyed even in 700 years. Is there something to do with the tower, or is there some kind of protection? Meanwhile, the guys have had enough waiting. The guy in the elevator, Land, asked the guy if he was going with them or not. Everyone is just waiting for him. The white man headed for the elevator and told everyone that they were suddenly going to the 11th floor because he found a small piece of paper. The level of danger from the following elements may exceed their expectations. There are stronger graves hiding on the 11th floor, with whom they can fight to warm up, and at the same time seek useful information. They were unhappy that the newcomer here decides everything and indicates where they should go. It's just a blank area. An order can come from the strong fallen ones here. The blonde man replied that if he didn't go to the hospital, there would be no danger, but inside one must be careful. The elevator doors closed, and suddenly a strange noise was heard. Soon the elevator announced its arrival on the 11th floor. The team exited. Strange laughter somewhere on the side. Someone was happy to have come to play with him. He just needs to be disturbed first because someone has been waiting for a long time. It seems that the sound came from the last team, so the guys need to be very cautious. The blonde realized that the sound resembled the cries of a little girl, or even an adult. There seems to be a difference in mood between them. Suddenly, something liquid dripped from the ceiling onto the white man's shoulder. It was a strange black substance that transformed into a large hand. And once again, Captain Boo saved everyone. He asked everyone to stay calm. It seems that one of them became emotional and caught the attention of this girl. The level of this monster is not low at all. The captain won't be able to defeat it in one go. He fought against its disgusting hands and couldn't understand why there were so many of them. He doesn't want to play with its strange tentacles at all. At that moment, someone told everyone to stop. It's time to destroy them as soon as possible. The children suddenly became very positive and said not to touch their toys. The whole team started fighting the monster, while the hunt continues and keeps intensifying. Captain Vu told everyone to act quickly and not play games. The voice was very impressed by such a cool captain. Subaru was also cool. There would already be crowds of beauty around him, but it seems there is no chance. The guy suddenly realized that he was bored and wanted to sleep. The team continued to struggle with their big black monster hands. There simply seemed to be no end to them. They kept coming endlessly. Meanwhile, Bihaus was kept away, and after being diligently stretched, he got bored and would gladly go into Mirelure. One of the players was very annoyed by this. Why didn't anyone attack this newcomer in the meantime? But you think that the voice of the little girl had a very strong effect on the mood. The kid noticed that if the number 0 really calls another monster. The blonde guy realized that since he was busy, he would investigate for now. Suddenly, Captain Bull told him to stay still and not move. They will understand soon enough. He is free to wait, and then they will all leave together. The guy said it was a shame that their emotional state didn't stabilize. Those tentacles will continue to attack. Therefore, he will go check the source, and when they can all calm down, they will have to pursue it. While Wormshi struggled with one of the appendages, he asked the captain where he found such a bastard who lacked courage. If his mood swings don't go beyond a certain number, he might be a truly brave guy. But if it's always 0, or if something is wrong with the device or the game itself. Meanwhile, Bai Wu had already entered another completely dirty room. In front of him, he saw a dog pen named Dylan. He will do an excellent job of imprisoning someone. Anyway, the poor one couldn't get out of there until she was released. The chain inside the cage is also for Dylan to play with ropes. Of course, it's a bit heavy, but if it's about habits, then a lot can be done. The guy almost stepped on the needle while it was happening. There may be sedatives or other drugs in the scattered needles. 1 injection will refresh the mind, 2 injections will force the body, and 3 injections will put it to sleep. Then the voice warned the guy that he had nothing to look at here, and the documents inside had all been destroyed long ago. And there is no owner at the moment. It's better for him to pay attention to the table in front of him, which contains so many secret objects. Seasons, cramps, and things of that poor thing that were not destroyed and were left there. So there's still only one choice. Each of the objects can give the guy either talent or friendship with the poor one. And it's not tedious to take all of this so close to the heart. You have to think it through carefully first. If a guy measures one of these options, the other 2 will immediately disappear. The voice opened the journal and checked that there was no date, and words like benevolence, righteousness, and morality were written on each page. Who wrote in this strange journal anyway? This archive is filled with details that he, est sorti, would like to know. But when the poor one sees it, will it give her hatred, friendship, or talent? Bai Wu has to handle all of this himself. The key that was nearby is the key to this cage. He can open the lock from another place, which might turn out to be a shortcut, or even more in the abyss. Thinking about it, the archives store things that may be interesting to him, or for another day. It must have something to do with the story, or maybe it will help get closer to the truth. The crest doesn't have any clues, which is also remarkable. The key fits a door, so there may be important clues behind the door. The voice knew that the guy is always in a state of connectivity, the same rolling nostalgia of a past life. It was like a lottery. Let's see the first bias fall. The gain will create a new talent. The second ticket will win the location of the fallen one, and the third, the hatred of the fallen, and their persecution until death. But hating people is probably normal at this moment. The team finally finished with the hands of the monster. Wangxi noticed that his indicator had dropped a lot, just like Nejo. Now they have to go find Bo. But where? Do they need to understand everything first? From what they've seen, it's safe to say that the 2 rooms at the end of the corridor are laboratories. Moreover, they should contain a lot of equipment, but everything has been destroyed for a long time. The test subjects are kept in cages, and every movement of theirs is monitored. The experiment proceeds by introducing a reagent and observing the subject's reaction. This reagent may have something to do with the deaths during this experiment. Someone visited the subject. Their thoughts came into contact with the thoughts of another person, but at that time, there was no hatred in it yet. The blonde man was distracted from his thoughts by Landeju, who shouted at him and asked how his investigation was progressing. There was no way he could open the locked door, and at that moment, the boy thought that the monster didn't show itself like a real one in the end, which was very annoying for him, since he pretended all this time that he was scared. At that moment, the voice wondered how the subject was visited, and their minds were affected. How did Bai Wu come up with such a strange idea? All of this thanks to the note that the blonde found with the fallen one. That person, before becoming fallen, probably hadn't met that girl. At least the hospital couldn't let its monsters meet each other. The subject was clearly mentioned in the note. Maybe she was communicating with someone else, and it was a secret between them and another subject. The second-floor monster feared being transferred to the second building, and in the end, it turned out that it had indeed been transferred there. The voice asked, "Does this mean that the abilities of the young girl were discovered by the hospital staff? Was she surpassed by one of the other subjects who were in contact with her thoughts?" And all of this was entirely possible. From this, we can conclude that the fallen ones, and this good body, are much stronger than in the first one. At the very least, there is much more hatred and resentment in them. It's possible that those who acquire a certain luminosity are redirected to the second building. On the other side of the door, the long-haired man kept knocking and asking what the newcomer was doing there and why the door wasn't opening at all. Even the deceased Renault didn't answer these questions. The guy turned to the captain and asked if the blonde man would die there. But it didn't matter because he would open that door anyway. The captain told him to take care of his legs. The hands of that monster infiltrated through the floor and crawled up to the feet of one of them. At that moment, the captain drew his miraculous sword, and Nadia didn't lose her vigilance. It seemed like it would never end. Meanwhile, on the other side of the door, Bai Wu had already sorted the journal and the key, and only one comb remained on the table. In fact, even the voice doesn't know what to do with it. According to the words in the note, it can be determined that the subject is a woman. But the question is, who would use a comb in such an environment? Bai Wu asked if the voice had any information and warned it. That gun didn't need to doubt his professionalism. There was really no information about this comb at that time. The team continued to fight the monster. No one understood why the level of emotions was so high. It seemed like the fallen one himself was already approaching. Has he already encountered this monster in this room? Naja asked Shantae to determine where the monster itself was at the moment, but he was too busy helping with courage, which wasn't very good. Captain Vu said he would clear the way, then save the newcomer, and they urgently needed to leave this place. Suddenly, the doorknob started shaking rapidly from side to side. Then Bai Wu came out of there. And then, why couldn't he at least make a sound if he wasn't dead? The blonde responded simply and differently, saying that now he could go to the 19th. Why was he still alive if the living? Then why didn't he say anything when they knocked for a long time? And why did this monster disappear as soon as he left the room? And had he already fallen into this room that he had already taken care of? I replied that for now he had only temporarily eliminated the source, but all of this would happen again very soon. The captain looked at him with a strange look, but didn't respond. They already had to go up to the 19th floor because there were no more clues for 11 days. He continued to insult the guy, but he was slightly besieged by Homchi. However, the main thing is that the good is alive. At that moment, the boy was upset that he hadn't played enough yet, but it was just whims that weren't worth paying attention to. As the team was already getting into the elevator, the newcomer had a question. Were all those who had fallen before just ordinary people? Really, if they stay outside the tower for a long time, they can also fall under certain circumstances. There was a strange silence in the elevator, so the captain asked if he had already studied the watch. When the value is 75, the clock starts ringing the alarm. The upper limit is 300, and well, it was written in the manual. He must pay attention to the color of his dial. Up to a value of 75, the dial color is green. After 75, it turns orange, and when the value reaches 175, it becomes red. Soon, the elevator stopped at the 19th floor, and then the captain said it was time for them to get out. The voice in the blonde's head noticed that Gunn didn't hesitate at all to ask questions. Everyone ignored him, although the captain hadn't finished what he wanted to say. But the guy himself should have already understood everything. The guy realized that apparently, if there were too many accumulated negative emotions and the chains reached the red values, the person turned into a fallen one. This feature is clearly popular. In fact, when people are angry, they really look like monsters. The clock indicates perfectly, turning. The team got out on the ground. All the windows around were closed, and because of that it was pitch black. The captain told everyone to turn on the lights, and Sayoi ordered to explore the area. The guy, as usual, started stammering, and said that if they fell behind the door, their level is higher than the monster that the captain killed earlier, and for a reason, the guy didn't have time to finish, because the captain stopped him and told everyone to wait for his orders. He drew his sword, and then the sounds of the dead were heard in the background. Bai Wu asked the Day if the captain always behaved like that, and he nodded affirmatively, even though Wang Si is the first one. But their captain always rushes forward. But he shouldn't worry even if Captain Burr encounters a fallen man who turns out not to be of his blood. He will always remain intact. Odir had already dealt with the monsters in their entirety, while everyone else stood aside and waited for the order to act. The blonde was amazed by the captain's speed. Does the accompanying force develop different facets for each person? Womshi, standing beside him with arms crossed over his chest, replied that everyone's strength is the same. But with each increase, a person receives additional abilities that enhance their strengths. It is impossible to describe this process like that. The individual themselves will understand when they move from the first stage to the second. The voice understood that it couldn't be simpler after all. It's just like skills in computer games. And it seems that the captain is accelerating the speed. This one Shi obviously enhances their attack and health. Standing on the side, one of your attack and speed were at 50 out of 50. Mechan X is the undefended perception. They sing very vaguely. This girl should be the weakest in the team, but certainly not in terms of characteristics associated with survival. Is everyone in this team, except one sheet, fake? There is no match, and there is an urgent need to run, interrupting the hysterical voice. Captain Glue said everything was ready. He took care of all the monsters alone, and now they can go where they need to go. I noticed that a fallen level 3 mutation had died. It had an arm shaped like a fossil that could cut through metal. That guy won't oppose the opening of the mantis boxing. It's a shame because he was such a good representative of martial arts. He now rests here and guards the hospital. When he devoured the director, he only obeyed the orders of the poor. It seems that these 6 were the gatekeepers of the second corps. Beirut asked Captain Guy to stop. The fallen of the first corps are not their equals, and as long as he controls their emotions, the fallen of the second corps will not be able to sense them. And the longer he stays outside the tower, the more their concurrent power rapidly increases. So why doesn't he sit in the first building? Lin plays Harry somewhere on the side. So is that guy even a kettle or something? The world outside the tower rejects people every 4 hours. Interferences increase in the human body. For example, speed decreases, all feelings are dulled, mood jumps back and forth, hallucinations start, attacks weaken, and the person becomes increasingly resistant to the fall. They start to fear light or darkness, and so on, and impasses become tourists.